So I'm going to hand this over to Craig at this time to really talk about your experiences. And I know you're just looking at leaving Jane Doe, which you've been for many years, and you have, again, years and years of experience doing this work. So really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Craig. And Craig will speak for about, speak and converse with us for about 30 minutes, and then we'll move to Stephen about the same time period, and then we'll have about 15, 20 minutes at the end of the session to be able to just exchange ideas, additional ideas that we might have. Okay? So Craig, I'll hand it over to you for now.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate this. You know, it's I've put together a few notes, and I appreciate Stephen for thinking of a topic list. Appreciate that. But it's kind of, you know, I'm going to think a little bit about my history and what it means to be in the juncture of my life I'm in now. You know, there's professional dimensions that are pretty significant, as well as personal dimensions. You know, like, what does it mean to retire? Who would think of such a thing? So it's kind of, you know, and what is a role? And so I've been thinking about it, and I have a few slides to help us think about it and help me be on track with my presentation. But all, you know, it's a dialogue, and I'll ask for, you know, any questions to come along, and, you know, if you want to say something in chat, I might see it, I might not, I don't know, maybe someone will pick up on it and we'll do, but I don't think it's going to be more than 15 or 20 minutes of talking, and then we'll see what it brings up in terms of this kind of piece. So I'm going to first see if I can successfully share my screen with you all. So I'm going to share my screen now and select my my PowerPoint window, and I'm going to and tell me if that looks right to you all. Is there a screen that you can all see that says some history on it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah? Okay, good. See, I'm going to put the chat window away so I don't see it. So this particular screen is something I thought I'd start with, which is looking at some of my 4 decades of work. That, you know, I started in St. Louis, Missouri, and went to a conference on men and masculinity. I was walking down the street in St. Louis in 1977, or maybe it was late 1976, and I saw a poster on a wall, maybe in a coffee shop, that was brown, had pen and ink, black ink, and the title said, "Straight White Male Wrestling with the Master Culture." And I was a young 20-something in college. I was feeling pretty alienated and said, that sounds like me. And I was, there's a pen and ink drawing that showed a young Caucasian man kind of shivering in a cold wind. He was in a long coat, he was in the woods. It was kind of that feeling like kind of a bit of a lost in the woods feeling. So that was attractive. This turned out to be the 3rd National Conference on Men and Masculinity, and that was in Des Moines, Iowa. I was in St. Louis, Missouri. So I went to this conference, and, you know, it was my first introduction to men's work, men's dialogue, and the principal conversation there was celebrating manliness, and a dialogue between gay and straight men. We weren't talking about the gender dialogue wasn't very sophisticated. It was just gay and straight. And there wasn't a lot of specific conversation about race, but there was some racial dimension, but not a strong one. The community more or less was university-based, primarily white middle class, and thinking about personal growth and social action. Those were what was on the agenda. And it was very much informed by the women's movement at the time, the the feminist women's movement. I believe the first National Conference on Men and Masculinity was a couple of years before that in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was organized by a women's studies class. And so it was really about a place of women who were thinking about the changes in culture and what's the dimension of masculinities. And so I went, and it was a wonderful experience for me. Somewhat frightening in some ways. I wasn't quite prepared for intimacy that it presented. But I was excited by a couple of workshops, and one was by a group from University of Illinois called it was a Men Against Rape organization, that was working with the Women Against Rape group on campus. They were giving a presentation about their theory and practice about men against rape. They were doing counseling with male significant others, the men who were connected with women who had been sexually assaulted. And it was a great presentation. They had an interesting analysis that had to do with colonialism, and it had to do with imperialism. Remember the times it was not long after the resolution of the Vietnam War, and there's a lot of conversation about imperialism and mapping that to how men treat women as a male ideology. I thought that was very interesting, and it resonated with, I agreed with that, that's true. And they were saying, well, we're graduating. Anyway, I went to visit them the next summer, and they were excited to have a visitor, and they were saying, well, we're leaving campus, and here's our box of stuff. Maybe you can go do something with it. And that's how Raven started. You know, the fourth national conference was produced by the folks from St. Louis who went to the third. It's quite a crowd that went to the third, and produced the fourth in 6 months' time. The third was in the late winter, and the late winter meaning it was in the early spring, late winter of 1977, and the fourth was in the fall of 1977 in St. Louis on a college campus called Washington University in St. Louis. And I didn't start the conference in St. Louis. It was another group that did that, and I joined in. So it was a great bringing together and growing of that version of a men's movement in the U.S. that came to St. Louis. Out of that came a ongoing project we called the St. Louis Men's Projects, and it mapped near the conference. So there were coffee houses and celebrational pieces, monthly brunches where we talked about each other's lives and thinking about feminism and our own work as men. And the action that I was interested in was the question of men's violence against women. And so I helped a project start that would work with the local women's center on that, some male dimension of that work. And that's how I started. So in those 10 years were the founding years for a group in St. Louis called Raven that I was a part of, a community of men doing a bunch of interesting work that was cultural and celebrational and, shifting our lives around. And I kind of found a home. And I've sort of been in that ever since, one way or the other. In 86, 87, I moved to Boston for personal reasons. And I followed my wife at the time, who I'm a straight person, and she was my wife, and she got into a college degree program in Boston, and I went with her. That's how I got to Boston. And that was in 87 and since. I knew at that point in time in my history, I didn't feel like being in direct service as much anymore. I'd done this intensively for 10 years, and I was thinking about how to bring this work to what all of us need to talk about, not just men in trouble or causing trouble. And so I got involved on the board at Emerge in Boston. Many of you know what Emerge is. It's a program of the same vintage. They opened in 1976 in Cambridge, here in the Boston area, to do work with offenders of domestic violence. And they're in existence today and continuing. And I was on their board for a few years, in 1990 through maybe year 2000 or so. And I got involved in a business. I know computers and software, and I did database consulting business for a bunch of years in there, just floating about what can I do and working with Emerge and other projects here and there. And then there was a kind of a thing happening in the late 90s around the millennials, change in millennia, the year 2000. You call the importance and the feeling of year 2000 that I felt a recommitment. I had an offer in the late 90s to take my business much larger. There was an opportunity for doing a national project and to diving with both feet. I turned it down, decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I decided to somehow bring myself back in more front and center. And at the same time, there was a new interest at the State Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence here in Massachusetts, Jane Doe Inc., to work with men in a new way. And that's brought me into a conversation here in Jane Doe Inc. that turned into what we call now the Men's Initiative for Jane Doe Inc. And that first conversations were in year 2000, and then some money came. We found some money in years 2002, and I've been doing that work ever since here. And so in the last 10 years have been here in Massachusetts and thinking about the collection of members of Jane Doe Inc. as a platform. And NAMEN was born in about 6 years ago, thereabouts. And so in the same time frame, we've been doing this work here. So that's my path, what I've been doing. A lot of conferences, a lot of connections. And so that's kind of my trajectory, mostly between St. Louis and Boston. And so let me show you, if I can get this to work. I just found out that my slides wouldn't change. Let me see if I can fix it real quick. Give me a moment while I go here. I think must be a good reason for that. No, it looks like it should work. Let me try it again. There you go. So there have been accomplishments along the way that I'm taking stock of now, thinking of retiring in some fashion. I have many good relationships. I think that's a real accomplishment, is prioritizing relationships as part of being who I am. Understanding of what a solution might be to the problem. You know, what are the solutions? And we've come to a contribution I feel is substantial. I'm really happy about it. Helping bring a new era of men and boys mobilization. I mean, thinking about this as a strategy and a process of mentorship is important to me. And a model. I mean, a model that I hope has some legs to continue for a while and grow. So I'm proud of these things. My early work with offenders of domestic violence was important to me as well, and it's really shaped kind of a core understanding of what we're dealing with here. That it's, you know, much less about mental illness and individual, you know, kind of bad apples, more like a social norms issue. And I really know I believe that. I think all of us do too. So what has happened is I want to share a few slides about this model, and then I'm going to finish up, you know, with a few questions. So I often use this slide as the start of my talks. This idea of men and boys as partners in prevention. That partners in prevention is a celebrational idea that we're joining. We're part of the solution for prevention. One of the pieces of the work I know has been helping centers that are historically women's organizations who in their root are fighting against male aggression in a fundamental way. That's not all they're doing, and people have grown to be a more diverse engagement these days. But that core piece is still there. But thinking about how to connect with adult men in the community as partners is not well understood, or it's not natural, I'd say. So my being here has represented kind of hope for that and a path for doing that some way that has value. Our state is a small state, but we have representation all over the state. As diverse as this geography is, ranging from, you know, strong and large business centers to, you know, marine environments here and down in the islands, marine environments that are very, you know, unusual spaces, both with wealth, you know, and service and poverty right next to each other, and our Cape Cod, and then our this college area here, and that Stephen knows so well. We call Western Mass and the Berkshires. You know, this is Massachusetts, and I don't know, people say there's something in the water that gives us a creative, you know, a creative juice in our region, and that's true. I think maybe it's the fact that there's 95 some odd degree granting institutions in the Boston area alone. It's a remarkable area for that reason. But it's where we live, where we work. But these agencies are working on the ground, and it's a wonderful platform to do our work. And they all want to move this work forward. They all want the problem to go away. And so if they can find a model that can hold it successfully, these agencies that are about sexual assault and domestic violence intervention will hold this work in some way going forward. So we all know this chart about moving upstream, that defining for people what prevention is, you know, and that you rescue people is what we have to do, but we need to also address those who are at risk, who are in the water already in some secondary way, and bystander engagement does that in a pretty interesting way. But how do you address, I think there's a lot of creative work we can be doing that we haven't done yet about identifying quote unquote men who are kind of strongly in this water, kind of a secondary or at-risk group. There aren't that many programs, I don't think, that are thinking that way, but more about intervention, after the fact kind of stuff is what we do more of. And then primary prevention, which is I'm most proud of what this means, and thinking about promoting healthy masculinity. I'm so love that our movement is doing this, that we think of nurturing roles as a very powerful antidote to the aggressive roles that men have, that celebrating nurturing is where we're heading with this, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Some of you know this chart by Russ Funk. You know, and some years ago, he wrote a couple of books, and he presented kind of a readiness chart, not unlike Prochaska's Stages of Change. Some of you know about that theory. But if you think about men as a range of readiness to be helping in this work, ranging from hostile and opposed all the way through active leaders. If you think of these as four major groups: hostile and opposed, uninterested or at least not paying attention, willing and ready, ready if asked, and then active leaders. There are some interesting but different things to do with each of these groups of men. And the work I've been doing more of is on the side of this chart of the active leaders and dipping into the willing and ready. That's where I've been doing most of my work of late. Whereas, you know, where I started this work was kind of way over here, hooking up with some active leaders and working with the men who are causing trouble, you know, connecting those together. So I think this is really useful for me in thinking about what we're doing and how we go forward and where you place your project. But this is something I'm proud of as a theory base, and I'm glad we have a theory base. So you all know the White Ribbon Campaign, and this is our pledge and our card that we spread around all over the Commonwealth. And we often stand and say this pledge in groups. We often say two sentences, and the first sentence is the international pledge: I promise never commit, condone, or remain silent about violence against women. From this day forward, I promise to be part of the solution in ending violence against women and all gender-based violence. So I'm proud of this work, and that it's spreading as far as it is. We have 90+ organizations supporting this in their local communities in Massachusetts, and hundreds of men who are obligating themselves to this idea, and it's wonderful, really. We do it in ways like this, and being in our state house and fill auditoriums and celebrate together. Local cities and towns. This is the city of Cambridge more recently celebrated White Ribbon Campaign with this projected image on their city hall, which I thought was really beautiful. But they have they're in Cambridge. They have a new local ambassadors group called Mending Cambridge. Chuck, you know about your group Mending? Yeah. Well, Mending, they love that idea. I don't know if you've heard from them yet. Have you heard from them yet, Chuck?
Not from. Did you say from Cambridge? No.
Cambridge, yeah. Well, no, I've been directing them your way. Go talk to go to the source of the water. Go to the good. So they have a group called Mending Cambridge, and it's a group of mostly city employees who are thinking about their roles. So it's pretty cool. And these kind of things, pledge events that happen all over the Commonwealth. This happens to be a picnic with Father's Picnic. And most of these men are in nurturing fathers programs, and they bring their families for a picnic once a year around Father's Day. And they stop the picnic and take the White Ribbon Pledge in the middle of it. And so there's it's a barbecue with a bouncy house for the kids, and running, races and having a fun time, and with the literature tables, and then things like this happen as well. So it's a cool thing, very diverse, happens in many different ways. But I'm proud of this work, and represents. I'm proud of this as a leave behind in my career. So dilemmas. I'll wrap up. How's my time, Chuck? Can't hear you.
There's about 10 minutes left, Craig.
Okay, good. Well, I'll wrap up and see if anyone has questions. But this is some of the things I'm thinking about: how to pass along my skills further and knowledge. I'm going to be consulting a bit for a few years. I know I'm going to have a gig here at Jane Doe Inc. this year to help their next campaign season, which is our 10th annual Massachusetts White Ribbon Day campaign. The 10th annual is a nice milestone. We're very excited about it. and I'll be helping with a few parts with it, but I won't be employed at Jane Doe any longer after September. I'm thinking about, I don't know that I feel successful in providing mentorship. I certainly don't have a cadre of youngsters who other than what I represent here is not organized. I'm thinking I'd like to be more mindful and purposeful about that a little bit in the next few years. But what does retirement mean in this way? So I'll learn that. I don't really know the answer to that question. It's just a real question for me. And the idea of privilege, my responsibility for privilege is sort of how I hold my privilege as it's a responsibility. My race, my gender, my class, my nationality all represent areas of privilege for me, and how do I continue holding those responsibilities through retirement? That's going to be an interesting challenge for me. So those are my dilemmas I'm thinking about. And in the field, I know there's a few dilemmas that are less personal, but I think salary scales are very real about this work. Something I might call a men's scale versus a women's scale. I don't know if any of you have noticed contradictions about this, what to charge as a consultant or what to charge as a speaker or what sort of things to go. I think there's something there, movement rates versus business rates. I think it's a dilemma for our field for us to talk about, maybe to promote, to write about, something about class here. And then investing in prevention, I feel, what about when that becomes larger investment than survivor support? Would that ever be true, or what happens? I think it's a dilemma. I'm happy to talk about what I mean by that, but an organization whose core business is survivor support, how can it live with itself if it's spending more money on prevention than it does on direct support? And I think that's actually a hard thing to do. I think it's a hard thing for a organization to come to that's historically worked survivor support. And that's a question. It's an interesting question. But that's pretty much my talk. I want to contribute to a career path of young men in some fashion, in a little more organized way, and where I'm heading. And that's kind of the thing where I'm at. Have to entertain any thoughts or questions about what I've just said, but this is sort of my transitional thoughts and my leave behind as I see it.
So anybody have any initial thoughts you want to share with Craig on what you just spoke to, and any questions you have for him?
So Craig, this is Emiliano, and like you, I work for State Coalition. I've been, with the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault for 8 years now, and I'm curious to hear from you. Is there any sort of advice that you would leave to men who are working for state coalitions around the country, who are engaged in similar work that you have been for as you've been? Like, what is a piece of advice that you would give us so that we are able to both sustain ourselves and sustain the work like you have over the years?
I probably count my men's support groups as some of my sustaining processes. I have friends I have dinner with every month, personal support. The place, the women in my life are usually not the place to go to for struggling with some of the things I struggle with. My role at work is to listen, and listen as well and deeply as I can. And to listen to one another. It's not the place to argue and fight. It's to ask questions, but it's not the place to argue and fight. That there's a lot of struggles and there's a lot of issues with, we are all survivors in our own way. Many of us are survivors of sexual and domestic violence in one way or the other. Many of us, that's why we're committed to the field. Some of us are more or less than others, but it's a place to listen. Find that support system and stick with it. Have a place to go with a group of men that you feel your peers, who you can be real with and ask questions with and talk with. That's been very important to me all along the way.
Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Emiliano. Other comments or questions for Craig?
Yeah. Craig, this is Alan. I typed a question while you were talking, and then your slide kind of referenced a little bit with regards to primary prevention, and you had mentioned, that moving forward, that'll be the kind of uphill battle. But I know you've seen a lot of progress made thus far. Moving forward, what are some of those barriers that we should really focus on if we really want to increase that primary prevention piece in the work?
Yeah. Are you asking my thoughts about what will increase and about that, and how do we respond to the barrier I mentioned?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we need not expect coalitions to increase their investment beyond their investment in survivor support. That they need to be, I think there needs to be a parity there, a successful parity and a connection that partners there. And we raise our expectations of institutions around us. As we have been, confronting the sports industry and inviting the sports industry to do more, our educational institutions have so much they can do about primary prevention. Our schools, our faith institutions, our social institutions can do more. So the idea of partnership is what is the antidote to that barrier. That if our job here is to orchestrate partnerships, that'll move us forward. It's everyone's job, right? We all have a role to play in this work. Cultural shift is a big tent. That's what I think about.
I like I think your piece around the responsibilities for this and where they lie. And you're saying, what I heard you say is the coalitions, Battered Women Sexual Assault Coalitions, are primarily focus, in your view, your responsibility is with attending to the harm that has occurred, and that men should be partnering with women to attend to ending that harm and engaging others within the community. Am I hearing that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a dialectic there. I remember the old frame that Stephen will remember with the MenEngage conferences about our roles as oppressors and the oppression of our roles are a duality that men hold. A sense of victimization and being victimized, and and that our sense of power and privilege is all wrapped up in all of those things, and we need to work our way out of that through dialogue and conversation, mutual conversation, and action, of course. But yeah, I think so. We have that responsibility.
I like it particularly because we don't hear as much now, but we have in the past, and occasionally still hear about men wanting to engage and then complaining that the women don't make space for them to engage. And so I really like you being one of the pioneers of this kind of work, really clarifying that it's men engaging other men, and we do this in partnerships with women and with others. So I really appreciate that, Craig.
That's right. That's right. It's not their responsibility to make space for us. We're being welcomed into an environment that's well established.
Yes. Hi, Craig. Hi, Chuck. Hi, everybody. Thanks for sharing some of your trajectory. Very impressed. I wrote a question for you in the chat, which is basically if you can share any particular rewarding, memorable moment in your work.
I've been, there are many, and it's pretty exciting and fun and rewarding to be sitting in an environment. Two things. One is when a historically women's organization, a rape crisis center or domestic violence program kind of gets the sense that men are accompanying them in their work. That they sit down and say this is exciting to them. That's a rewarding moment to hear that it's feeling valuable to them. And then, of course, sitting in a room with several hundred men standing up and saying, "We will work on this together." That's pretty exciting when that happens. That's important. That feels good.
Okay. That's great, Craig. Yeah. Thank you. Great, excellent stuff. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the years of work too, and being able to be in this space with you as well. So it's very good.
I'm honored.